Hi guys, welcome to part 5 of this Angular 7 tutorial series. In this video we'll be building our registration form and adding a user service for registering new users. I've posted all the instructions that we'll be going through on my blog, which I'll link to in the video description. Okay, let's get started. Alright, the first thing we'll be doing is updating our fake backend to handle requests to the registration route. Alright, so there's a few small code changes that we'll be making to the fake backend. Rather than having, the first is up here, rather than having a hard-coded users array, we'll be storing our users in local storage. This is to simulate the behavior of a real API with a database. The next addition is to our handle route function. We'll be checking for requests made to the register route and passing those to the register function. The register function down here first checks if the username is already taken and returns an error if it already is. Otherwise, it increments the user ID by calculating the current highest user ID in the array and adding 1 to it, or defaulting to 1 if this is the first user. It then pushes the new user to our users array and saves in local storage before returning an OK response. Okay, so going to Visual Studio, let's open up our fake backend and make our changes. So first, the updated users array. So we'll replace that there. The new route in the handle route function. And then we'll add the register function below the authenticate one. Okay, moving on. Next step is we'll create a user service. The user service will handle all HTTP communication for CRUD operations on user data. At the moment, in this video, we'll just be using the register method of the user service, but I've added the getAll and delete methods as well, because we will be using those later on in the series. As you can see, the user service doesn't do much. It pretty much is just a wrapper for HTTP requests to the backend. The getAll method makes a GET request to the API/users route. Register makes a POST request to /users/register, which, as we just saw in the fake backend, we'll be handling with a fake response. And delete sends a delete request for /users and the ID of the user. Okay, so I'll copy the name there to create in our services folder. And copy the code for the user service and save there. Next, we'll add the user service to our services barrel file, so we'll be able to import the user service directly from the folder name rather than having to use the full path to the service file. Okay, next up we'll add the form logic to our register component. Now if you want to refer back to any of the details we'll cover, I've got it all detailed in the blog post. I'll go through the code here for the video. Okay, so our register component, in the constructor we're checking if the user is already logged in, and if they are, we'll redirect them to the home page because there's no point showing the register page if you're already logged in. In the init method, we're setting up or creating our form group using the formBuilder.group method and setting it up with 4 fields for first name, last name, username and password. We're initializing each of those form controls with an empty string, setting them all to required with the required validator, and the password is also set to require at least 6 characters using the min-length validator. The fGetter is just a convenience getter, so we can access our form controls using f-dot in the template that we'll be creating next, rather than having to use the full path registration form.controls every time we want to access any of them. In the onSubmit method, we're first setting the submitted property to true. So in the template, we can display validation messages only after the first attempt has been made to submit the form. We then check if the form is invalid. If it is, we stop processing there. If it is valid, we set the loading property to true. This shows a spinner in the template and disables the registration button while it's submitting. And then we pass all of the values from the form controls to the userservice.register method. Then we subscribe to the result, and on success we navigate to the login page and pass a registered true parameter in the query string. That'll be used by the login page to display a registration successful message. If there's an error, we set the error property to the value of the error message, and that'll be displayed in the registration template. And we reset the loading property back to false, so the spinner stops displaying and the register button is re-enabled in the template. Okay, so first, we've already got our register component, so we don't need to create the file. Let's just copy the code for the register component. Let's open that there. Paste. Okay, next is our register component template. Again, if you want to refer back to any of the details, I've got a breakdown of pretty much everything in the HTML here in the blog post. I'll just be going over it, trying to go over it briefly. So at the top we've got our error message, which displays if there is an error message. And then we've got each of our form controls in our form group. I'll just describe one of them. So standard label, we've got our input that is bound to the field within the register component by using the form control name attribute. Then we have a conditional ng class which sets to invalid. It'll add the CSS class of invalid if the form has been submitted and this field, the password, has errors. Below that we've got our validation messages. So first there's a container around it which if the form is submitted and the password has errors, it is displayed. And then within that container we have each of the types of errors. So if the password is required, so if it's empty, it'll display this error message, or if the password is less than 6 characters, this message is displayed. Then down below here we've got our button, which is disabled while the form is loading, so while it's submitting, and also while it's submitting we'll display a spinner. And that's pretty much all there is to that form. So let's grab the code there. Back in our register component, let's replace what we've got there. Okay, moving on, next we'll add our registration successful alert to the logging component. So as I showed before, on successful registration we pass registered true in the query string to the login route. So within our login component, first we'll add a success property to hold our success message. So opening our login component, success. Then within our init method, we'll check if the registered parameter has been passed, and if it has, set the success property to registration successful, so it can be displayed in the template. Right, going to init. Oops. Okay, and finally, in our onSubmit method, we'll reset the alerts, the error and the success alert back to null. So if there's any old alerts displaying on the form, we hide them when the form is submitted. So down here, paste that there. Okay, the last step is to update our login component template and add the success div for displaying the success alert message if the success property contains a message. So just line 2 there, going and updating the login component. Okay, and I think that's the final step. Alright, let's start our Angular 7 application and see how it looks. Alright, opening up our terminal window, let's navigate into projects, Angular 7 tutorial, and run npm start. Okay, there's our application up and running. Now if I go to the register form, see that our register form is here. If I try to register without entering any details, our validation messages are displayed. Alright, so let's enter a user to register. Username test. And you can see now that while the password is less than 6 characters, the validation message is displayed requiring more than at least 6 characters. So set it to test123 and register. Alright, now if I log in with test123. Okay, I'm logged in, so that worked. One final thing is let's check that we can't register the same username twice. It's test123. Okay, so the check in the fake backend for a duplicate username is working and returning the error there. Change that to test2 and register. Also, if you want to look under the hood, you can open up DevTools and you can see in our application tab for local storage, we have a users array, and here's the 2 test users I created, as well as a couple of others that I created before while I was testing the app. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel below if you'd like to see more. Cheers.